We're looking at test 1, section 3, number 14. So let's take a look at the question. We're going to talk about the two different ways to solve this one. So as we've been talking about with all the questions, there are techniques that you can fall back on, and then there is the more math way of doing it, right? So if we look at this one, we say 3x minus y equals 12. What is the value of 8x over 2y? Now what you have is a more challenging system of equations problem, which you could solve with substitution, right? So that is one method. The other method is to choose some values for x and y that would equal 12 in the first equation and try plugging them in to simplify in the second. So the easiest thing to choose would be x equals 4. My y would have to be 0 in order to give me 12, right? So this is my x, this is my y. Now, if I try plugging that into where my variables are here, in 8x over 2y, and instead of x and y, if I plug in 4 for my x and 0 for my y, what do I end up with? Well, I'll leave 8 to the 4th for a moment. Anything to the 0 power, remember, is 1, right? So I have 8 to the 4th divided by 1, which is just 8 to the 4th. Now at this point, I could do two things. I could go to my answer choices and I could use process of elimination. Or, well, let's start there. So 8 to the 4th. I'm not going to figure out what 8 to the 4th is because 8 to the 4th is a big number and I don't have my calculator. But I know that I found a value, right? So D is not correct because the value was determined. 8 squared has to be less than 8 to the 4th, so that's not it. And if I have 8 to the 4th, that's bigger than 4 to the 4th, right? So that's not it. So I'm only left with A. And I can confirm that because what I would do is I would say, what is 8 if I make the base 2? So in other words, 2 to the what power is 8? 2 cubed. And if 2 cubed is raised to the 4th power, what do we do when we raise a power to a power? What do we do with those exponents? We multiply them. So we would say we have 2 to the 3 times 4, which is the 12th power. Okay, so that's one method to use. The other method to use is to use algebra, right? So if we use the algebra skills that we have, we would say we have a system of equations here. Okay, so let's take a look at that. So we have 3x minus y equals 12. And I have 8x over 2y. And I need it to have only one variable, right? So I'm going to solve this first equation for y so that I have something that has only one variable. So I'm going to add y to both sides to get it by itself. Okay, so I'm going to try this again. Okay, adding y to both sides, and I'm going to subtract 12. Right, so we're going to get y by itself. So y's cancel out. I have 3x minus 12 equals y. Now, where I see y, I can plug in 3x minus 12. So I have 8 to the x over 2 to the 3x minus 12. And this is where the using algebra can get a little bit tricky. When you are thinking about what this looks like, you are saying that, thinking back to your variable, your exponent rules. If I said I had x squared times x to the 4th, right? I would say, what do I do with those exponents when I'm multiplying, right? And for those, I add them, right? So I would get x to the 6th. And I could do that even if there were some negatives in there, right? So if I had x to the 2nd times x to the negative 3rd, I would end up with x to the negative 1, right? Because I would add those things together. Okay, so that's just a simple review of rules of exponents. So let's erase this for a moment. Erase that part. I'm telling you this because now you can see that I could separate this denominator, right? So what I have instead of 2 to the 3x minus 12 is I can go backwards essentially, and I can say, well, I have 2 to the 3x times 2 to the negative 12th. So I've broken up that exponent and gone back to having the base of 2. Right? Does that make sense? So now at this point, I have a power raised to a power, right? So I can do 2 cubed and say that's to the x power. So what I have is 8 to the x over 8x, right? Because 2 cubed is 8, and it's still raised to the x power, times 2 to the negative 12th. My 8x over 8x is going to cancel. I'm left with 1 over 2 to the negative 12th. How do I make a negative exponent positive? I move it back up to the numerator, right? I switch whatever side of the fraction bar it's on. So right now it's in the denominator, so to make it positive, I move it back to the numerator. So you can solve it algebraically, but that took a lot of work, right? So this might be one where it's better to try choosing numbers and testing it out and doing some process of elimination rather than algebraic, unless you're really strong with those rules of exponents. Okay.